Hey,
Hi, how are you?
good. How are you?
Good. Amanda? You're Amanda?
Yes. Yep. So I'm one of our presenters today.
Awesome. I'll make you a co-host.
All right.
And then who else? Do you have co-presenters?
I do. So I know that my other College Board counterpart should be on in just a second, Amy Miranda. And
Okay.
then we have Wendy Beckmeyer. Oh, there's Wendy right
There.
there.
I'll make,
And Nicole. Um, Nicole from W&J too is coming on in just a bit early. Oh, there's Nicole.
yes. So she should be a co-host as well.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. The more the merrier.
All right. I'm going to share my screen to make sure that all works.
Yeah.
We use Microsoft Teams at College Board. We're transitioning to Zoom, but we were really appreciative of the Revolution Prep training. That was very, very helpful.
Okay. Who trained you? Who was the trainer?
Oh gosh,
Is it Andy?
I think so.
Okay.
Is he the one that did the session on standardized testing yesterday?
Ooh, I don't know. That might have been Ben. Was it Ben?
I think it might have been Ben.
Ben Neely?
Maybe.
I really don't know. I'm guessing. We're just throwing out names at this point.
I would, if I saw him, I would know for sure.
Okay. I hesitate to describe people because I don't want to.
Right. I know.
Won't even go there.
So you guys are able to see the slide?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Oh, Shannon, do you see Amy Miranda? She's our last co-presenter. She's in the waiting room. Oh, you're muted, Shannon.
Thank you. I'm a
There
rookie.
she is.
All right. So, yes, I let her in. Sorry. That's probably why it didn't ding because I had it on mute. I will make her a co-host then as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Amanda.
Hey, Amy, you sound good.
I feel better now.
We allowed you in.
Well, down there. I was knocking at the door. Can you see me, Amanda?
Yep, I
Okay.
see you.
I don't see myself, which is strange. Okay, so Nicole and Wendy are on.
Yeah, I think it's just the four of us right now, and then Shannon is our moderator. Shannon, do you stay the whole time or are you heading out?
I will be here.
You'll be here? Okay.
I'll definitely mute myself and I might turn my video off, but I will be here because what has happened, this will be my 4th session, is people tend to float in, even, so I can continue to admit people in.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. But if I have to leave, like at the end of 45 minutes, because you are all co-hosts, there's 4 co-hosts, I can assign one of you to keep the session going if you're still kind of chit-chatting with people.
Okay. Okay, great.
So that when I leave, it doesn't end or anything.
And you're going to do the recording and all of that, right?
Yeah, it's recording right now, yes.
Okay.
I'll just leave it on.
Yep, Amy, I'm controlling. I'm going to actually test that. There we go. Do you guys see it switch over?
Yes.
Okay, great. Shannon, do you want us to start right at 2 o'clock or have we been needing to give people any extra time if we're running over today?
You can, if you want to wait a few minutes, it's totally okay. I'm not, yes, you are in control.
I think what I'll do for Amy, Wendy, and Nicole is I will start right at 2 and then, we'll do our intros. So that way that'll take a couple of minutes as people come in.
Was there a session right before this that may have run over? Or what are people coming out of? Like the morning session, people started, I had 10 o'clock and that they were trickling in a little later because I think something was right before it.
That's a good point. It's a different world right now with a virtual session. Then people would be coming from lunch or probably a keynote or something if we were in person. And I have the PACAC little housekeeping items. I'll go over those really quickly at the beginning. Wendy and Nicole, have your sessions, you guys were in other ones, have they been going over or?
So the 10 a.m. session, we ended pretty much on time to allow people to get to other things, but it was a very lively discussion. 45 minutes just did not seem to be long enough. So I think we're probably going to be facing a similar thing. At least I hope it'll be a lively discussion as well. But
yeah, Amy and I are going to try to keep any of the content and the setup to 10 15 minutes maybe with the conclusion part. So we really hope they're talkative and that your part is the bulk of it. That was a question, Wendy and Nicole, do you want me to, or have other sessions had success with taking the deck down during any discussion, or do you want me, your slides were pretty comprehensive. Do you want me to leave that up as you're talking, or you want me to take it down at any point? I think we can leave it up for now. We'll see. It's so quick. Like it's not like the 90-minute PA convening where we toggled back and forth, but I think maybe we'll leave it up for this.
It might help spur discussion.
I think so too. Yep, to remind them of the different topics.
Hopefully, if people use the gallery view, you know, with the side by side, they can still see folks.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, whoever's talking.
I know there are a number of really good topics during this last session, so it'll be interesting to see how many people attend this presentation.
Yeah, definitely.
Noticed it was a strong slot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Amy, you said there were a couple you wanted to go to. I'm like, you have to come to this one.
That's good though. It's healthy for PACAC to have a lot of options like that.
Yeah, I haven't been to any other ACACs, but I've thought that the schedule is very easy to read. Getting into just one link for every session is so helpful. It's been really good. Okay, well, I'm going to get us started. We are at 2:00 p.m. today, and we know from all the sessions so far over the last 3 days, 45 minutes goes by really fast. So welcome to the Future of Enrollment Leadership panel. I am Amanda Soul. I am a Director of Higher Ed Services at the College Board, but really excited to be here today because ACAC work has been a big part of my whole career. I have been spent a lot of time on a campus in Ohio as an enrollment leader and in many admissions related roles throughout my career, and really involved in Ohio's ACAC. So really glad to be here today for Pennsylvania. I'm going to let my co-panelists introduce themselves now. So Amy.
Great, thanks Amanda. Hi, I'm Amy Miranda, and I know a lot of you from having now worked for the College Board in Pennsylvania for almost 9 years. And whereas Amanda works primarily with schools in PA that are from Harrisburg East, I work primarily Harrisburg West, but have worked in Pennsylvania for a long time, both with the College Board as well as work I did previously to this with higher education finance, as well as working at W&J College years ago too in admissions. So very happy to be here today to talk to you and virtually see everyone. I'm going to turn it over to Nicole.
Thanks, Amy. Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see you virtually. And I'm Nicole Folcretto, Vice President for Enrollment at W&J, and I'm very excited to be with all of you today. Wendy?
Hi everyone, I'm Wendy Beckmeyer, the Vice President for Enrollment Management at Robert Morris University in Pittsburgh. And I'm looking forward to our conversation today. This is a terrific publication that I think has a lot of really great insights in it. And so I think you're going to find that there'll be some takeaways that you can take with you today.
All right, thank you everybody. And just a few housekeeping items before we get started. You know, if you need the Act 48 credit for this session, you probably know by now, but there is that link at the bottom of the conference landing page, as well as the conference session evaluation. So we would love to hear from you. We would love to know what you think today about this and future topics that would be useful. So to kind of get us started and introduce the Enrollment Leadership Monograph. This is something that we are going to post in the chat today for you a little bit later on, and some of you may have seen this. So you may have gotten a copy of the monograph there in blue. If we were in an in-person world, we could have mailed you one after the session, but the PDF is up online, so you can easily see that. But essentially, in 2018, the College Board published the Future of Enrollment Leadership that was drawn from a gathering of over 30 enrollment leaders who considered the challenges and opportunities that will face higher education over the next 15 years. I don't know that they saw 2020 in that conversation, but as we were preparing for today and thinking about the roles that enrollment leaders have to help their institutions thrive, a lot of the same concepts that we discussed back in 2018 are more relevant than ever before right now. So we've kind of pivoted a little bit to talk about how you can leverage some of these concepts in your work right now in our current climate. So Amy's going to talk a little bit more about the monograph.
Great, thanks, Amanda. So when the enrollment leaders came together and looked at the future of enrollment leadership and what that meant, they took a look at what challenges were facing higher education and the kind of questions that are driving the role of higher education in American society. And I have to say, when I was looking at this, I thought, boy, I think that's happening even more than ever because of what's been happening since COVID and so forth. And as they looked at the challenges and the issues, the fact that there's going to be new and innovative thinking that has to go on. It can't just be doing things the same old way. And so when we think about the challenges, we think about internal challenges, schools having new programs, having to measure outcomes probably more than ever, looking at changing management structures, or how should those management structures be changing with the increasing challenges. Cultural challenges, globalization, the use of technology, growing economic inequality. And I think if we look at what's happening right now with the Black Lives Movement and so forth, I think this is even more true as we consider those things. Population, the demographics, I think that was a lot of what drove this, were a lot of the things that we were coming to grips with in terms of what's happening with demographic shifts and what that means in terms of the workforce and what's going to be required. Funding, looking at, and boy, I was going to say, now we've gone through, something that, again, we couldn't have seen, economic bust and recovery cycles. They create funding challenges, and I don't have to tell all of you, I think everyone is facing a lot of those kind of budget restraints and questions and so forth that we hadn't even anticipated. And perception. The increasing cost of college drives public questions on the value and return on investment of a college education. And again, I think we were hearing that a lot pre-COVID, and I think that now post-COVID, or not post, but during COVID, we are hearing it even more, probably because of online versus on campus and all of the different questions that come up. So as we looked at challenges, the three challenges with the most direct impact or relevance kind of fell into three buckets. I mentioned before demographic shifts. When we looked at what happened with the birth dearth, and if some of you have read Nathan Grau's book about demographics, he talks a lot about the birth dearth, and so that beginning in the later half of the 2020s, enrollment will begin to fall. Usually we talk about that cliff happening around 2025. And that the impact will vary based upon the location of the country, but it will also vary based upon, for you as an institution, based upon your selectivity, race, ethnicity, lots of factors affect the demographic shifts. And when we look at that impact, we know that schools are already seeing that impact when they look at their enrollment goals and if they're making or missing goals. The second bucket was college costs and financing. With increasing college costs, we know, average college tuition rose 260% between 1980 and 2014. That's sizable. Value versus cost, question that constantly comes up. Rapidly rising costs and stagnant family incomes have raised questions about value. And this, I think, will only continue as families are feeling more of the pinch going forward. And then rapidly changing workforce needs, the changing employment landscape. Current college students predicted to hold 10 to 14 jobs by the age of 38. which is very interesting, especially when I know there are probably some people out there who've like held, 2, 3 jobs during that time period at most. Global workforce crisis looms. We know that including an overall labor shortage, mismatch of workforce needs and skills to what's going on out there in the marketplace, and cultural challenges. And then the pace of technology change. It's impractical to graduate students with knowledge of specific technologies needed in the future. I mean, sometimes we don't even know what those technologies are. And I think we've seen that as well. So those are some of the very specific challenges that we saw and that the leaders came together on. So when we look at those challenges, we think about the kind of expertise that's needed from enrollment leaders as you work with these challenges. And the 3 key areas of expertise that this group sort of thought would position enrollment leaders to provide valuable insight. One would be to have external perspective, that enrollment leaders truly need to be able to have that perspective of what's happening outside of their institutions. The long-term view, not just seeing what's happening now, but being able to project and plan for long-term success, and then integrated in systems thinking. And there's actually some things here shared from the book, and then some of you may know Randy Dykey, who had been at Drexel. He's now at Cleveland State, but he makes an interesting comment or quote in the book there about when thinking about structure and influence, making sure that we don't always think top down, but considering ways to formally institutionalize relationships through a matrix and cross-organizational. And I'm sure many of you are working more and more that way on your campuses now. And as we continue in looking at capabilities and new roles for enrollment leaders on campus, these might include, being even more involved in shaping how those institutions think, act, and evolve. Increasing student success. We know that that's incredibly important right now. Leading strategic conversations. Many of you may have already found or will be finding yourself leading conversations across campus, that you hadn't anticipated before. Being in a role with your other, your colleagues on campus that you hadn't quite planned for. So working with presidents, trustees, and other senior leaders to implement a shared vision. And, honestly, having been around higher ed for quite a long time, I find these things very exciting. It's a way for everyone to grow, but it's also challenging and, might not quite be what some people expected. Amanda?
All right. So I think one of the best ways that we can leverage some of these ideas is to share a little bit more. So from the monograph that, again, we'll get you a copy of, there's kind of 5 categories when we're thinking about common challenges and just comprehensive duties of an enrollment leader in this day and age that we want to put out for some discussion today. So I think many of you, whether you are an enrollment leader, maybe you are an aspiring enrollment leader, and we want you to be, we need you to be and continue to have that interest in the field. Or maybe you're on the high school side and you work with a lot of college campuses and you want to understand more about what they're experiencing. I think these buckets are really great to understand. Obviously, building off of what Amy said, data and analysis is huge right now for any enrollment office. I would add technology to that. I look back of when I started in admissions like 15 years ago, the difference now between like the campus information systems and everything that you can do, but everything that you're also expected to know about pulling data and using technology and strategizing things like digital marketing. Those things didn't exist when I started in admissions in the early 2000s. But now enrollment leaders have to be able to do that, and they have to be able to use that data then to project and analyze what's best for their institution. Economic leadership in higher education, Wendy's going to delve a little bit more into this in a moment, but thinking about the internal and external challenges that we see here. You know, right now, many of you on campuses are internally looking at the end of the fiscal year and your budget, and maybe you have money left, maybe you don't. Then next year's budget, projecting that, and where do you need to put new dollars? Like I was on a webinar the other day and they were talking about new dollars being needed for COVID testing on campus and cleaning, more cleaning than they've ever done before in the residence halls. And those were never in the budget before. So you have those internal concerns, but then you have the external economic impact on higher education. So students and families are also seeing challenges in their workplace and their home, and that's impacting your work. Admissions risks and opportunities. Nicole's going to delve a little bit more into this one. We know enrollment leaders wear so many hats, and they have to know about so many things that are happening and so many things that are coming. This could be the demography and the birth dearth and some of the projections in 10 years. It could be changes in the legal landscape and holistic review, social cultural movements and priorities, student preparedness, and many, many things. Student success related to that, we know the idea of recruiting to retain, and the emphasis enrollment offices get involved now with retention and with making sure that students are set up to succeed and complete their degree is so important. And then finally, this one I smile about when I was an enrollment leader, the centrality of enrollment office. They're everywhere, right? Everybody wants a piece of your day and a piece of your work. You know, I worked so closely with athletics when I was on a campus, and the coaches and academic units and departments and the student affairs office. Even student groups wanted to have enrollment involved with helping with recruitment. And so you want to do all of these things, and there's only so much time in the day. So how do you prioritize that? Also, divisions sometimes are funneling up through enrollment that didn't before. I think marketing is a great example. On some campuses, they go completely through enrollment, or at least there's an enrollment marketing area. So enrollment manager really needs to understand that. So we really want to hear from you. And to kick us off, we're going to turn things over to Wendy to kind of delve a little bit more into the economic leadership.
So Amanda, when I listen to you, I think about technology, and to date myself a bit in this field, I remember us counting folders to tell the cabinet how many applicants we had. And I worked for a really optimistic director who would always say, oh, the person you would count her name was Kathy, and he'd say, just add a few more. I'm sure we have a few more than what you counted. So just the lack of sophistication of data, many years ago to what's going on now. And I think also when you were mentioning the centrality of the enrollment office, one of the other things I'm finding too is the on campuses, the rationale for other offices to say that they're contributing towards enrollment, and therefore they should have a piece of the very skinny pie that we're dealing with now in terms of budgets. So really kind of interesting to see how everyone now is truly an enrollment management person. Everyone's a recruiter, and the ways in which that's defined across the campus. So when we look at economic leadership in higher ed, I think that when I think back to last September and being at NACAC, I was there for a session on women in higher education, and the doom that people felt about having to make changes to NACAC and what this might mean to our centrality about students and wanting to do what was best for them, and feeling some people felt that we were really having to kind of cave, if you will, on these changes in order to comply. And, of course, we already knew about the demographic cliff from the Nathan Graw materials, but it felt like there was this layering, if you will, of challenge in front of us, and nobody was really sure what next May was going to look like. Then came COVID-19 in the middle of yield season, and as students were finishing up courses online from high school, significant civil unrest that is really changing how we all think about everything that's important to us. Where in the order of life does education fall, given all of the challenges that we're facing? So it can give us a sense of discomfort, but it also can give us a sense of place in that we can be, you know, kind of forces for good and still do the job of the enrollment management professional. So when we look at the NACAC changes, part of what we see there is institutions created incentives for students to fill out the FAFSA. But I think it's going to be hard this year to determine whether or not those incentives really changed the percentage because of what happened later in the recruitment cycle. So it will almost be a, you know, before middle of March analysis that we'll have to do versus a post middle of March analysis. And yet we know a lot of students complete their FAFSA during that March and April timeframe. So it'll be interesting to see. And of course, whether you're a regional institution or a state institution or large public or selective private, all of those are going to be factors in figuring out whether or not incentives to fill out the FAFSA really worked this year. We also saw, you know, incentives to visit the campus, and some institutions move their deposit date to June 1st. And it's really interesting to see how those changes came about too. In terms of what we were doing and have been doing and are still doing at Robert Morris University is I've actually felt kind of invigorated. Remember, I was talking about all those years I've spent in the field back to when we were counting paper to where we are now. But it's pretty exciting to work with a clean slate, to not have to feel tethered to the strategies that we've been using over a number of years, and to be innovative, to do things differently, because everything is up for discussion. And so there were a lot of things we did do differently. A few of them include, you know, the freedom to work with parents and students in a meaningful way differently than we have in the past. And one of the examples of this would be that we offered to our deposited students, and we put this out around the middle of April, but they could take a free course over the summer, which was worth over $3,000 in value if they're a deposited student. And we, you know, I secretly hoped that maybe there'd be 5 students that would take advantage of this, because we had been hearing that most high school students were not pleased with their online experience in high school. So I wasn't sure whether they would see Robert Morris as a different kind of opportunity or not. But we have over 300 students taking advantage of this opportunity this summer. So I think that, especially for first generation and underserved students, that this is a tremendous opportunity to build a bridge between high school to college. One of the areas where I'm most concerned about everything that's going on right now is potentially those students that really saw college as a stretch financially, that this will be just one barrier too big for them with the things that are going on currently. But I'm hoping that because we've offered this course and kept people engaged, that we won't see this gap in first generation and underserved populations that could happen just by the forces of what's going on in our world today. When we look at demographic cliff, we know that there's fewer high school graduates, and also we know from our analysis that there were fewer students completing the FAFSA overall in the state of Pennsylvania. We saw a lot of really good progress that was early in the year, but then there was some trail off happening after the first of the year. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in a year from now, given that the federal tax deadline was extended to the middle of July. And whether or not that creates a gap also for people who even completed their tax return if they are in these underserved communities, and does that impact then their ability to fill out the FAFSA for next year, for fall 21. Also, we've been involved in all of these discussions. We're used to kind of being a little protected in enrollment management in March and April. Kind of like, if you want to be kind to your enrollment manager, don't bother them in the month of April and May and even March, because we are saddled and have so much stress that we're dealing with related to the class, and trying to pivot when we need to, trying to decipher what the class looks like for trustees, for senior leaders. And this year, we were likely involved in discussions, maybe even every day. For instance, our cabinet and a few others have been literally every day together since the middle of March. talking about our plans and our findings related to COVID-19 and what next fall might look like. The awarding of the CARES Act funds, just a myriad of things that perhaps we wouldn't have normally been doing. So I think that it's kind of like, a snowstorm and the holiday season and, maybe March Madness and all these things happening all at the same time for an enrollment management person. Also, in terms of equity, inclusiveness, diversity, and globalization, our assumptions related to meeting these very important objectives is not playing out as predicted. So we're also needing to interpret in an environment where we can't look at last year and say, well, compared to last year, we think this is where we'll end up. That's not informative and helpful this year in the way that it normally would be. So the economic leadership in higher education is filled with more questions than answers, and our informed gut has become extremely important. I was on a call a couple of weeks ago, and someone was talking about this, that the benefit of being in the field for a long time, that we have people like Nicole and Amanda and Amy who have gone through 9/11 and the economic crisis and so many, many things in our environment. Some of us have been in enrollment since Rodney King. So we've had these unfortunate circumstances in our lives while we've been in our professional careers. And while we're not necessarily able to predict what's going to happen now, we have instincts about what the future may hold based on those experiences. You'll see that I have some questions here about returning to normalcy. Well, we talked about a new normal, but it's really a new normal. And thinking about, offering courses in the fall versus online. And I mentioned before the potential setback for first generation and students of color, affordability given the rate of unemployment, and potentially offering online degrees to international students so that they don't miss out on a US degree. And so those are some of the things that I think we might want to talk about. I keep looking at my notes to make sure that I've covered the couple of things that otherwise that I wanted to mention. One is that we also have a public price match plus with Ohio and a West Virginia school, and that's been very helpful this year. And then the other is that we reduced our deposit for Pell eligible students, and that was incredibly meaningful as well. So I want to turn it over to Nicole, who's going to cover some of the other areas of this great publication, and we're looking forward to hearing your questions.
I think we actually do have one question on this, Wendy, if we want to take this right now. It's in the chat, but it's basically, what are your thoughts or anybody in the group's thoughts on incentivizing things like visits or FAFSA submissions, and making sure not to exacerbate already existing gaps between students with varying levels of support and resources. So this institution is thinking about offering small grants for students who visit or submit the FAFSA, but knowing that students who do this are sometimes already the more resourced students. So what are your thoughts on that, especially related to budgets that are already tight for next year?
There were already grants being offered to students who visit campuses, but more so as a refund for the expense that they might incur prior to the changes of NACAC. I think that if I were to kind of go back a couple of years and say, how do you feel about appeals? Not great. How do you feel about incentivizing students to visit? Not great. How do you feel about incentivizing students to fill out a FAFSA? Not great. But the challenge is to come up with a variety of incentives that don't just play to the individuals that maybe are more savvy in the admission process, but also providing incentives to students who maybe wouldn't have otherwise been aware. So I think that it comes down to perhaps having a menu of those. And so I'm not in favor of them, but this is where our industry has gone. And I think in order to be an institution that is at the table, it's important to think about offering them, unfortunately.
There's also a question about how do you think with the first year of NACAC in place, do we think has there been any observations you've noticed in the past few months that are related more to the NACAC changes than just COVID and everything else happening?
I would say that the planned NACAC changes we saw through about the middle of March, and then they kind of went away since then. And I think a lot of it was we were all focusing on how to meet the needs of the students that were out there, and realizing that there was this slowness that we saw. And I would say that I was in New Hampshire working for an institution when 9/11 happened, and there was this 4 to 6 week kind of bubble, if you will, where not a lot happened. Everything moved very slowly. So it was, and here, I think this year there's been a lot of like Zoom fatigue. So initially everyone was on looking at virtual tours and all of those kinds of things. Now everyone has a virtual tour and nobody wants to look at them anymore. Now that's a gross, generalization, but overall, I think differentiation is now hard again because we've all caught up as institutions. So my sense about NACAC is that the incentives were really driven by NACAC. Some of the other ways in which we've been accessible, for instance, we did a drive-through campus visit. And so we stayed 6 feet away from people. They could see the campus. We used a bullhorn. There are all kinds of things that we did related to that. We still had financial aid appointments, financial aid person in a tent outside, the mask on, somebody in their car with their window down with their mask on. And so these kind of one-to-one communications that still need to happen during COVID, and personally, as opposed to virtually, we're still able to happen. But it's a clean slate, and we're all having to figure out how to do this while keeping everyone safe. But that's where I would say, I think the incentives were more NACAC related. And I think some of the delivery of recruitment has been more COVID related.
Very good. All right. Well, I think even more conversation. Thank you so far for this, but I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to talk a little bit more about admissions, risks, and opportunities that we have right now.
Thanks, Amanda. And I echo everything that Wendy said. We're definitely all in this together. So from the admissions, risks, and opportunities standpoint, specifically this chapter in the monograph is really beneficial when you think about everything that we've been facing. Enrollment leaders have needed to pivot accordingly. And for those of you who know me, you know that I don't do easy. And I know that I'm among colleagues in this session right now who also don't do easy. If we did, we would not be enrollment management professionals. We would make a different choice, right? So I think it's something for all of you to really sit back and reflect on the last few months of what you've done and realize that you are called to do your very best. And that quote from Duke Ellington, I just think is so relevant for this time, because based on everything that we've heard, Amy and Amanda speak about the challenges, and Wendy really speak to the application of how we as enrollment managers take all of these challenges into play when we're doing the work that we do. It really is empowering to know that we're in the right place to do the best work we possibly can for the students. I think sometimes enrollment managers, we're so involved in reports and data and really thinking about providing lift, and we're worrying about yield, and we're worrying about melt, and all of these things that are very much industry standard worries. I always say we have to bring it back to the students and really think about how this is impacting our students, because there are people behind all of these really important elements of the work that we do. So I can tell you from a W&J standpoint, I'll only speak briefly about this. Based on all of the things that we faced, whether it's the, NACAC changes, COVID-19, the demography issues, our commitment to access and diversity, holistic review, everything that we have needed to do this year, we knew that we needed to increase our yield game, and we did that through making personal connections. And at W&J, we have that luxury of doing that. But not everyone understood the how to make that happen and how to orchestrate it so that it was meaningful for the students. So it was something that the enrollment division definitely needed to lead and think through how we were going to do it differently. Many of us do this work year over year, every cycle, but we needed to think through how we were going to incorporate different platforms, different social media, different things that we know that the students, enjoy. And so we really worked through making those connections, whether it be through speed friending using our ZME platform, or doing trivia nights, or having a Kahoot session, which at first I thought, this is never gonna work. This just seems so bizarre, but we needed to innovate and we needed to be open to making that change happen in order to connect students during a really uncertain time. I can tell you, as far as risks and opportunities, as well as Wendy mentioned, we always look at reports. We have daily reports, weekly reports, monthly reports. We're looking at things year over year. And I've said, there's no model that we can insert a pandemic and know where we're going to land. There's nothing that we can do statistically and say, well, for enrollment, when a pandemic hits, you just use this formula. And so that uncertainty caused a lot of anxiety. But for those of us in enrollment leadership positions, that alone is a risk, not having a model. But we needed to look at it and say, this is an opportunity for us to educate and for us to really think through how we're going to make this happen. Because this is our responsibility. How are we going to connect students with the information that they need? How are we going to continue to tell that story? Specifically at W&J, I kept saying, what is our story? What is the absolute necessary information that we need to provide so that people feel welcomed, comforted, understood, heard? All of these things are really important. And I can tell you that, we're all called to rise during these very risky times. And right now, our industry, this is a risky time. From the demography, we have to really think, how are we going to continue to stay relevant while inserting and exploring new markets? What kind of bold moves can we expect? The holistic review, I know that it's come up in many other sessions throughout this PACAC virtual experience. Many institutions are moving to a holistic review that may not have had a holistic review before. So what does that mean for our colleagues? What does that mean for students as well, and the student experience? And of course, the whole global enrollment landscape, everyone feels that it's under attack. Our international students, they're worried, they're concerned. They want to be with us at our US institutions just as much as we want them to be with us. And so when things are compromised, we really do have to rise to the challenge to think about how we're going to innovate, how we're going to lead, and how we're going to make the change happen. So I think the next slide provides us some time to have a discussion. And we would love to hear from, many of you. How have you been innovative? How have you led your team? How have you made that change happen over the last few months? Because it has not been easy. this time has not been easy, but you know, it's just like I saw this video, I think it was on YouTube, and a comedian said, "This is March Madness. You know, survive and advance, people. This is March Madness." Well, now all of us are here. We have survived. We are advancing, but what are we going to do together to make that happen in the short term, in the long term? So I welcome any comments here. Nobody wants to chime in. No one wants to unmute. I understand. Talk about Zoom fatigue. It's definitely a part of what we do.
It is. If you can't unmute, just raise your hand and we'll look for that too, or write a question in the chat.
Hi, Nicola from Penn State Brandywine. Just wanted to share a couple of things. You know, when we started, I was terrified. I said, oh my God, we have to do an accepted student program over Zoom. I'm 48 years old. I'm lucky I know how to work this computer. I mean, come on now. I'm like, where are my young people in the office? I need some help. So, but honestly, we all learned together and it really worked out well. And now we're finding how great it is that we can continue to meet with students virtually. I mean, Penn State, as you know, been out in the news, you know, we are going to be on campus. We're being very flexible for the students that want to be at home. So there'll be courses offered and they'll be in class as well. But we want to continue to offer those virtual one-on-ones with our families, you know, the students coming in and the parents, and we want to ease their minds with their questions and we want to be able to give them whatever they can do. We do a lot of one-on-ones. I would encourage folks to continue to do those if you can, because I think that's such a great opportunity. Because, you know, I think about it, everybody says, oh, it's not the same, but you're looking at the person, you're seeing their reactions, you're getting to have these private conversations because you're one-on-one. We're going to continue to do that. And we have wanted to do we have a very small financial aid office. It's 2 people and it's really tiny, and it's hard to do things in the evening. We've tried to do them before. A lot of folks are busy. They've got kids, they've got homework, they've got to take them to things. They're just getting off work themselves. Some of them are working a night shift. They can't, you know, go to learn about financial aid. So we're going to start doing those sessions virtually only and having them be, you know, after work time, after work hours, and doing that really for parents that have questions about financial aid. We have a lot of students a huge percentage of our students receive financial aid. A lot are Pell eligible and a lot are first generation. So we want to really be able to work with those students. And I always say I'm a first generation collegian as well. And it's really important that, you know, you need to have that support of that financial aid office and admissions office to sort of hold your hand a little bit with all of that. So we're trying to provide that for our families.
Thanks for sharing, Nicola. It's so great to hear about how other institutions are pivoting and working together. It's great to hear. I myself am also first gen, so I love to find a friend who is first gen, and we at W&J started first gen forums virtually, you know, this summer, which is great. But it's also concerning. We want to make sure that everyone has what they need in order to be successful before arriving on campus. So we're doing a lot of virtual meetings that we didn't really anticipate would need to be.
That's great. That's great.
This is Hillen from F&M. One thing that we started, the conversation actually started last winter, and I think the intent of this work, we kind of expedited the beginning of these efforts once the pandemic had set in, but a couple team members from our office, along with a faculty member across campus, started cultivating 15 student peer mentors for this year's incoming class. And we ran a small trial this year. So we took 150 students that were representatives. So even if they were student athletes, even if they were students that we felt like might already have decent support networks that were coming from some of our access partners, we took 150 students and we assigned 10 of these incoming students to a peer mentor that's a current student at F&M. and they started engaging in one-on-one conversations as early as April for students that had already started to enroll. And those conversations are going to continue into the fall semester. You know, if we're on campus in a capacity that will permit us to do so, they're going to turn into in-person team meetings. But we actually just hired a new vice president for enrollment who started the beginning of this month. And it's the first time that any vice president on campus has been given the task of retention as a formal responsibility. So this was something that our interim was kind of the, you know, putting in place to start to boost retention efforts prior to our new VP starting. So it's been a huge success for these 150 students. And I think next year the intent is to expand it out to the entire incoming class.
Helen, thanks for sharing. That's so great to hear. Anytime that you can connect current students with new students as well, it's just so beneficial for them. Are there any other categories from the monograph that anyone had any thoughts on or wanted to discuss or mention in regards to student success or data or centrality of the enrollment office? Anything that has impacted you even under the COVID-19 conditions? Anything that has shifted? So there is a mention in the chat, new SAT optional blind approach, many requests from colleges related to this. There are many colleges that went test optional as a result of just stay-at-home orders and students being scheduled to take an exam that may not have been able to do so. But we have been finding that many of those institutions are moving forward and staying test optional as well as a result of it.
Well, this has been a really great discussion. I'm sure we could continue way beyond 45 minutes. I wish we did have a little bit more time. Like I said, we will work with PACAC to try to get the deck. I know it was recorded with some of the links like this right here for the monograph, so you can read it. It'd be great to share with like the enrollment leader who just took on retention, right? So a lot of good things there. Really quickly, you guys will get this too. We do have a higher ed COVID page where obviously we post the updates that you need about SAT, AP, and search. But we also have resources on things like financial aid. Our policy team just put together a state-by-state overview of what we're hearing about high school grading policies, for example. That's up there. There's on-demand webinars. We actually listed a few out. Actually, as we speak, there's a financial aid one happening that will be up on demand soon. There's a role of race-neutral strategies in advancing holistic review in higher ed that's really valuable. We have enrollment leaders like Nicole and Wendy who have joined us on these recorded webinars to talk about things that they were doing. One is about yield and melt for the class of 2020 and COVID-19, and then a lot of search webinars too to help your recruitment pipelines. Just a quick plug for a couple things. The Enrollment Leadership Academy is something, we have some alumni on the call, Amy tells me. This is something I personally did too in the Midwest, since I'm from Ohio many years back. But this is really great if you are somebody thinking of staying and hopefully staying in the profession. This is not just admissions, it's financial aid too, but it's a way to give you a very comprehensive picture of enrollment and all the hats we wear, strategic planning, all of these kinds of things. So those
Amanda,
I was going to say, I know what Amy's going to say. I'll let you say it.
Oh, I was just going to say, and don't, if you go on and it says something about a deadline, don't let that stop you.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was going to say, sometimes too, it may not be you, you may have a colleague, there may be somebody even at another school, but please think about if there's somebody, and if you have questions, you can reach out to us about it.
Yeah, definitely. It says ASAP because we are trying to put together our next cohort. We hope to have some in person and online hybrid of it. But even if, depending on what happens now, it could be something you defer to 2021 too. The last thing I'll mention, I think we may have a couple of high school folks on the call. We do have our counselor workshops coming up, and you may be used to those. Usually we would have 4 or 5 across Pennsylvania in person. They will all be remote in 2020 this fall. We just launched registration. We have always had some webinar versions of these, and I think they've gone really well. So I think these will be just as effective. So we will get you some more information, and we thank you for coming, and please stay in touch. And thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Okay, Amanda, Amy, thank you. I'm gonna head off.
Okay, Nicole, thank you so much.
Thanks, Nicole.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Truly appreciated.
Oh, happy to help. Thanks. Have a
Thanks.
good one. Bye.
Bye.
Amy, I'm trying to pull the file of the chat. I think I can do it right here. I don't know if
I'm
they'll do
like-
it for us, but.
Oh, how you pull?
I saved that.
I don't know how you pull the file.
I saved it. Let's see if it'll file pull now. Huh. Let's see, it doesn't have a file type.
I copied it.
Yeah. I'm thinking we can get the decks to them. I never saw an option for, and they're all gone if I posted anything, so.
Here, let me put it.
Yeah,
I
you can
just
just copy and paste, yeah.
That's what I did. I just copied and put it in a Word document.
Okay, so you have it.
I
All
got
right,
it.
here, I'll ping you on Teams in a minute. I'm gonna go.